All right, Robin, are you there?
I'm here.
Hi, Robin. Thanks for being on the show.
No problem.
So how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing just fine.
Cool. All right, so once again, we are with Robin Strom-Mackey, former English teacher and journalist turned paranormal investigator, and now the writer of the blog, The Storm. So everybody check her out. We put all her stuff up on our page. If you guys are playing along at home, we will be posting more of her stuff for the people at home. So anyways, we sent you a list of topics. Now, for anybody who hasn't checked it out, Robin's blog is really extensive, goes over all kinds of topics. We just picked a few things we wanted to talk about, and I guess we can just jump right into that stuff if it's all right with you.
Certainly.
Cool. Well, you know what? Let's take a second. Do you want to kind of introduce the work that you're doing and let people know just kind of what you're about and stuff with your blog and everything?
Sure. I run the Delaware Paranormal Research Group, and I also write the blog. It's not The Storm, it's The Shore.
The Shore, I'm sorry. That's right. I got it mixed up because of your
but
name.
But it can be found at delaware.blogspot.com. So it's under delawareparanormal.blogspot.com.
When I was spelling your name
under The Shore.
When I was spelling your name originally, you told me spell storm, but move the R before the O, and that for some reason stuck in my head. Sorry about that. So The Shore.
It would be the perfect storm. So.
Right. We have posted it a few times for everybody. Then there you go. Sorry about that.
No problem.
Anyways, go ahead. Sorry.
So anyway, I write about, well, the nice thing about blogging is that you can write about anything that touches your fancy. So I find topics that I think are interesting in my reading, and I decide to find out more about them because I have just this really big appetite for anything paranormal. So, and it's allowed me to kind of explore all the different avenues of the paranormal that I wouldn't otherwise get a chance to do. If you're just going out as a paranormal investigator, you don't see all the different things necessarily. So,
and how long were you an investigator for?
Well, I still do investigate. I just
okay.
don't do it as often as I used to. So it's been about 7 years now, I think.
Oh, cool.
I've been investigating and writing.
So actually, I guess before we get into these broader topics, are there any experiences or kind of like compelling evidence that you were able to compile as an investigator that you wanted to talk to us about, or any stories from that?
Sure. I mean, obviously there's been lots of evidence. Probably my favorite episode, though, was when we were exploring an old fort in Delaware, an old Civil War fort that has been visited twice now by the TAPS team as well.
Okay.
And we had just a wild night out there one evening. It was about midnight, and there was a team of three of us in the kitchen area of the old fort. It was just really, I don't think I've ever seen paranormal activity quite ramped up to that point, because we just started hearing voices, and out in the courtyard we kept seeing people going by, and we thought it was other investigators at the time, because we'd hear people and we'd see people moving around out in the courtyard right outside the door, and then we'd go out the door and we wouldn't see anyone. So we assumed, as I said, that it was other investigators. So we went back into the kitchen after two or three of these events. We went back in the kitchen and we were doing an EVP session, basically. And we asked the question at one point, and there was this gargantuan bang that shook us to the absolute roots. We started screaming, and we all ended up huddled in a dark corner by by ourselves, shaking violently, because we had no idea what that bang was. We thought perhaps it was a cannon going off, like a residual cannon type of shot. but it also sounds very much like a door slamming, but it was extremely loud.
Sure.
And so that was probably the paranormal experience that really rocked my world. It was just really, really wild. And I should say that the TAPS team, when they were out investigating the same fort, had the same experience, basically. They heard the same residual, I guess it was a residual sound. That kind of shocked them, too. So
when you had this...
I like the correlation.
When you heard it, did you also kind of like feel like the percussion from it, too? Was it like something definitely in the physical world? Or
yeah, it was immediate, and it was in our distinct vicinity. I mean, the rest of the rest of the investigators throughout the fort heard it as well, but it was like right there for us. So
that's always when things get scary, is when they get brought into the tangible physical world, and it's some kind of violent sound like that. So
right, it's shocking. So.
And what other investigations stick out to you?
We also did a EVP session that evening, which was really interesting. We had a long, protracted conversation using the dowsing rods with an individual. We did a long yes or no session with him. I've never seen that kind of energy before. That it was that kind of long, protracted conversation with supposedly an entity.
So could you take...
Ironically enough, we were videotaping it. We had two videotapers going, or cameras going, I should say.
Yeah.
But one of them, for some reason or another, just blanked out, just stopped functioning throughout the entire episode. For no apparent reason. It wasn't functioning before that, and it didn't malfunction throughout the rest of the evening. But for that segment of time, it was completely blank.
Hey,
but
sorry,
my camera was functioning, so I managed to get it.
Oh, do you still have footage of that?
I do have footage of that, and I also have footage of we had a K2 meter on the ground at the same time, and it was going nuts. Unfortunately, we didn't get any EVPs. I thought it would have been a wonderful opportunity to get a really good EVP, but we didn't get one. So
would we be able to...
he was spending all his attention on the rods and the two, so...
Yeah, you know what? I just want to make a note. I guess we were kicked off the air for a second, and we're back on now. So if anybody's just joining us... but don't worry, this will all be recorded for YouTube and everything. If anybody's just joining us, we're talking to Robin Strom-Mackey, author of the blog The Shore, and she is a paranormal writer, investigator, former journalist, and a bunch of interesting things. So for anybody who doesn't know, can you? This was one of the topics I wanted to get to with you, anyways. Was dowsing rods, and is that the same as a divining rod?
It is. It's just another word for divining rod, or another term for it.
So now, how do you use such a device in locating paranormal activity or spirits, or how would you describe it?
How would I describe it? Well, it's basically a tool for, when you say divine rods, people are going to think, well, you use those to find water.
Sure.
They've also been used to find minerals and metals and petroleum, but really they're just kind of a tool to channel energy, or through, I should say. They're believed to be something that channels psi messages or unconscious messages through to your consciousness, if you will. And so you can use them basically to find anything that you want to find, because it's just a way to find energy.
So now we're talking about when you're using it to, you're talking about sort of a channeling process. What, we're kicked off again? Oh my God, what's happening? I guess we're kicked off the air again, but we'll keep going here for the recording.
Still recording.
Okay.
It keeps booting it off the air. What the fuck? Okay, well let's let's keep going here. Sit down, Erdly. So what I'm getting here is we're talking about something similar to like an antenna for a TV or something. It's a way to tune into a type of an energy or broadcast or something, and then you can, so the proper medium can interpret that. Is that the idea?
Yeah, that's a really good way to describe it.
Cool.
I hadn't thought of that, but yes, exactly. You can use them to read any type of energy that you direct them to read, basically.
So as long as you've got the right...
so the theory goes.
Right, and I theoretically understand that, not in a scientific way so much as a conceptual way, but yeah, I mean, I guess that's so that's something that you've personally used, or do you have a medium that does that with you?
I have never investigated with mediums. I don't really know how I feel about that, but no, I use them myself. Now, when the rods go off, I don't consider that hardcore proof that there's a spirit in the area, but I use it. It's kind of like what you said. I use it kind of as an antenna for picking up. Oh, there might be something going on over here, and so then we take our equipment and we go over there with an EMF detector and a voice recorder, and try to see if we can back up what we're getting off the rods with actual evidence. So I kind of use them as an instigator, I guess, or not an instigator, but a way of determining where the activity might be happening. I don't use them as, the rods went up, therefore there's a spirit here.
Right.
You see what I mean?
Definitely, and I'm kind of the same way, where we've had both types. I don't know if there's obviously way more than two types, I guess, but we've had, I would consider like two different types of paranormal investigation teams, and that's, to me, ones that rely on mediums and ones that don't. And I'm kind of the same way, where I'm just, don't know that I've ever seen any real convincing evidence of like total psychic communication like that. What would you say about that?
Yeah, I agree. I tend to be a little trepidatious about using mediums, because it's like the rods. I can't prove or disprove that what that person's picking up is true. It's their interpretation of the environment, and unless I have actual evidence to prove it, I guess, or back it up, I don't know if you can prove it, but
yeah,
unless you have something to back it up.
One thing
that
we come across a lot is mediums that make claims, and they'll say, well, this investigation, I got this and this answer, and we found the key to the lockbox that everyone was missing, and blah blah blah. And it's like, well, do you have any evidence of that? No, we don't videotape or anything. It's it's like nobody can ever back up these claims of talking to the dead.
Right, and you just kind of like, okay.
Yeah, you don't want to be, and really, I also don't want to close my mind to the possibility, I guess. But it's just the more I go on, the harder it is to believe that stuff. Yeah. So you're more into the scientific angle than I would suppose, and from reading your blog, I know you write about some paranormal equipment and procedures and investigation stuff like that. Let's get to shadow people. Do you mind if we do that?
No, sure.
So
what is that? Are these like the out of the corner of the eye things everybody talks about, or?
Well, I think a lot of times this happens in bouts of sleep paralysis, doesn't it? Where
that's not necessarily the case. Shadow people have been seen in broad daylight, and right out in the open. They've been known to chase people.
Maybe
down a street. There's even been accounts of shadow man coming up to a car window and like knocking on the window. So it doesn't always happen when someone's asleep. So they're and a lot of ghosts are described in a similar fashion, but they're supposed to be dark, shadow figures. I know that seems redundant, but
Sure.
of a human being. They're usually either sexless, described as sexless, or male. They're almost never described as being female, which is interesting.
How would you tell that? I mean,
I think people will probably interpret a threatening presence as more male than female naturally, though.
just a silhouette, right?
Right.
I mean,
yeah. So.
Well, you didn't grow up with my mother then.
Yeah.
But yeah, perhaps.
Okay.
But they also have been described. Some of them have red glowing eyes. I also have an account from a fellow investigator that described a shadow person that he saw as having yellow glowing eyes.
Mm-hmm. So where do you think this phenomenon started? Do you know anything about how long people have been reporting this stuff?
I don't know, but
I would imagine it goes back forever.
It's happened so often, and there's been so many accounts that they now separate shadow people from other paranormal accounts. So
sure, okay.
They become, in effect, their own category. So.
I always kind of threw those in the same category as like jinn and like dark energy spirits and things like this. Would you say that these relate to jinn, or is that a completely different idea?
Well, the reading that I have done, there's a gentleman by the name of Jason Offit from Mysterious Universe, and he categorized them into 5 separate categories. From the benign, which are just kind of goofy shadow figures, and they just kind of wander around and they do some silly things, and they're not terribly frightening, to the hooded shadow figures, which look like monks, and they are often said to be extremely frightening, and that they emanate feelings of deep rage. To the men in black shadow figures, which are really strange.
Well, the
men that they have like a fedora type of hat.
Yeah.
And they're often said to be wearing a suit, so they're just like a man in black, and they're not extremely frightening. They're more like they're checking human beings out. Like they're here on a mission, and they're doing their business, and part of their business is, I don't know, studying humankind or something.
Sure.
So the whole phenomenon kind of runs the gamut from the goofy to the scientific to the frightening.
Yeah, no, and I know a lot of people that report Men in Black experiences, they report no overt threat, but there will be this like vague, almost mobster-like kind of warnings that they'll give and stuff about how you might just want to get rid of those pictures you took, and you might want to do this or that, and that's a very interesting phenomenon that's really well documented. Actually, I think
it's strange, and I should also point out that it has been the phenomenon has been reported all across the globe in all different cultures. So
actually,
it's not just the Western.
Going back even before
that's having this phenomenon,
right? And it goes back to even before the days of suits and ties, and they would have like black kimonos, even in old Japanese stories, but they're always men in black. Yeah.
I got a question.
Sure.
Okay.
When people see the shadow people, does it work out that it's usually like the same person that sees these things all the time, or is like, can I see one day and then never again, or is it usually like the person who claims to see them all the time?
Well, it can be both. It can be you see a shadow person once and you never see it again. In other cases, they seem to attach to a person, and you'll see them over and over and over again over the course of many years. In some cases, they only show up when you're deeply distressed, because one of the things they say about shadow people is they seem to feed off fear and distress, especially the more evil of the group. And so you might, if you're going through a divorce, you might see that shadow guy, and if you've lost your dog, you might see the shadow guy. So So it can be over the course of a number of years.
Okay,
or
so
you might just see it only the one time.
So these are kind of like interdimensional energy feeding beings or entities, right?
That's been some speculation that they're interdimensional.
That was what I was just gonna. I was just gonna ask. Do you interpret this phenomenon to be some residual of a living person, or do you think of this as more of your what do you call it, elementary spirits?
I don't know if they're either. I would tend to go with more of an elementary spirit, possibly of maybe they're jinn, undercover jinn, but I don't think they're humans. In fact, I've read accounts by mediums, two particular accounts by different mediums, and again we had the conversation earlier, but both of the mediums that wrote the accounts said the same thing, that they didn't interact like human spirits, that they couldn't be detected. The one medium said, when I walk into a room where there's a human spirit, I know that they're there immediately. She said with the shadow people, she would walk into the room and they would like introduce themselves before she'd know that they were there, and it was only after they left the vicinity that she could sense them. So I thought that was an interesting account, and by two separate mediums saying basically the same thing, that they don't detect them like they do human spirits. So
yeah, that is interesting. So I, for some reason my gut told me they weren't like human, either. So let's
right.
So since we touched on the jinn, this is a really interesting thing, and I know like most people would consider jinn to just be one version of in the same kind of thing as demon mythology, right?
Right.
So this is a Middle Eastern take on a demon, pretty much, but it's kind of become the most popular term for researchers these days. But what can you tell us, and how would you define a jinn? Is it these are always evil, or are there positive jinns too?
They're like the shadow people. They run the gamut. I should say that for us in the Western world, the jinn had become the genie in the bottle, the I believe in genie, who granted wishes. Mm-hmm. Aladdin, Robin Williams is crazy, genie type of thing.
Right.
That's what we're talking about when we're talking about the jinn, or at least that's the westernized version of them. For the Muslims, they're something completely different. Like you said, they are basically the equivalent of demons for the Muslim in the Muslim religion. In fact, the Quran has basically the same story as our westernized Satan. There was a jinn by the name of Iblis. He was told the jinn were on Earth supposedly before humans. Then God created humans, and the jinn were told to bend the knee basically to the humans, his greatest and last creation. Well, Iblis was not happy about this, and he refused to bend the knee, and he and his followers were banished basically to hell. So the story of Iblis, who by the way took on the name of Shaitan, which is very similar of course to Satan, which means enemy or adversary in their language.
Interesting how all those religions tend to have the same stories, just in different words. Yeah.
They do. And, the interesting thing about when I started investigating, or I started reading about the jinn, and then I started reading about the shadow people, and then I was reading about the elementary spirits, the same elements of the jinn seem to run kind of through all of them. So the name seems to, the symbols seem to be coming up again and again and again. So you start to wonder if it's not the jinn undercover of darkness, if you will.
Sure, yeah.
But so the jinn are supposed to be created of the purest flame, or the essence of the purest flame, or plasma, which is also they divide the elementary spirits into four: spirits of the air, spirits of the water, spirits of the earth, and spirits of the fire. And the elementary spirits, the spirits of the fire, are called salamanders, and their leader is called Jinn. So again, it's all very interesting if you start to see the similarities.
So
and
definitely,
the salamanders are supposed to be of purest fire, and they are supposed to take on reptilian. They're supposed to look like reptiles or small reptiles or dragons.
Now we're getting
dragons.
somewhere.
And that's exactly what the jinn are supposed to look like. So,
yeah. So have you ever looked into? I don't. This is sort of an offshoot, but just since you said that, have you looked into any of the reptilian mythology that David Icke popularized?
no, I haven't.
No. Well, there's a rabbit hole for you. Someday when you've got about 11, 12 hours to waste on YouTube, go ahead and go down that road.
He'll make you think, that guy.
But it is another thing that is, since you said that is another thing that really permeates a lot of ancient cultures and their mythologies is like the idea that there's a reptilian evil race that shapeshifts and travels dimensions and stuff.
Supposedly their hybrids are leading our world.
Yeah,
and stuff
so
like that.
Anyways, whatever. I didn't know if you were hip to that whole deal, but
No, but that's another thing that jinn are supposed to be able to do is shapeshift, and that they're supposed to have been kicked off the earth and reside in another plane of existence. So all that again is very similar.
Yeah, definitely, and could all be influenced by the same stuff, I guess.
Right.
Jinn sound like assholes.
Yeah, they're really bad news. But so when you say the westernized popular version of a jinn is closer to like the Disney thing, whatever. In the classic Muslim sense, is there no lucky, happy jinn?
Oh no, that's not true.
There is then.
They're basically in the book by Imbrogno. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it. He calls it. It's called the Vengeful Jinn.
No, I don't know.
And he breaks them into several categories. The green jinn are the youngest of the jinn. They live, by the way, they are mortal. They do die, but they live far longer lives than human beings. And the green jinn are the youngest, and they're the adolescents. And they're like human adolescents. Some of them are cute and cuddly, and some of them are nasty and pull the wings off flies. Mm-hmm. They tend to be curious, especially about human beings, and so they're the ones that have the most interaction with humans. They like to play pranks. Some of them not so nice. But they're also the most easily called or harnessed, I guess, if you will. Of course, occultists have tried to harness the jinn and their powers. It's probably not a good idea.
Yeah, that stuff is
never. But it's the green jinn that come the most easily when called. So
then we've got
that enjoy interacting with humans. So
and then we've got the blue jinn after
mean.
that.
They're just not human. So their needs and human needs sometimes don't run parallel, and that's when you run into the problem with the jinn, basically.
And they can be rather possessive, I've read as well.
They can. They're supposed to be able to possess human beings.
Yeah,
that's for sure.
And they they get jealous. I've like a lot of the old stories have to do with someone maybe who falls in love or gets a new job that they dedicate a lot of time to or whatever, and then the story is that the jinn will try to sabotage, whatever's taking them away from
sadness.
Yeah, or whatever they're trying. Yeah, whatever their influence is over the person that they're attempting to have. Yeah. So then, real briefly, let's just run through the other ones. We've got blue jinn. Let's see. What are they like?
The blue jinn are extremely powerful. They're probably the most powerful of the jinn. They were supposedly banished when human beings took over the earth, so there's very few of them left, according to literature. Mm-hmm. But some of them might have avoided being banished, and they're thought to live in the in the deep recesses of the earth, especially the desert. Of course, we're talking about, the Muslims. So.
Sure. Okay. And then the red jinn.
The red jinn are the most dangerous because they are the followers of Iblis. They're out to get human beings, and they're the ones that are going to promise you the world and then, pull the rug out from under you, basically.
And Iblis is,
they're going to promise you things.
He's that Satan character, right? Iblis?
Pardon me?
He's like the Satan character, Iblis?
Yes, Iblis,
okay.
Shaitan.
Yeah, right, okay.
The guy that got banished to hell.
Sure.
They're also known to take reptilian form that's supposed to be so frightening.
Interesting. Okay, then the black jinn.
The black jinn, there's very little known about the black jinn. They are the ones in charge, though. They're the top of the blue jinn chain, I guess. So they're the top guys that are in charge.
And then all we've got is yellow.
And the yellow jinn are isolationists, basically. They tend to be the Unabombers of the jinn. They hide out, and not much is known about them.
Right,
so,
and write bizarre right-wing manifestos out in the woods. That's the yellow jinn. Okay, cool. So wrapping that up, I know it's already 9:40. We'll have to get through this. Let's see.
What's the black dog?
The black dog phenomenon is interesting also. And I know you, that's something that seemed like it was of special interest to you, right?
It was, because ironically, I had a friend who had a black dog episode, and I've been trying to get her to write it down for me for years now. But basically, she was on a road trip with her children. She has 3 children, I believe, or did at the time. They're all grown up now, but and they were on a road trip, and you encountered a black dog who chased the car and was seen by all 4 of the passengers in the car. It scared the living daylights out of them, and
now
that happened in the U.S.
For people who don't know about this as a phenomenon, we're not talking about black lab. What are we talking about here?
We're not talking about your typical black lab.
Yeah.
They can be scary too, but no, we're talking about gargantuan black dogs. They're said to be the size of like a small calf, so very large. They have large saucer-like eyes, like a cat almost, or one eye, like a cyclops. Sometimes they're headless, so to add just a little bit more fear to the whole, picture.
Right, yeah.
If you get close enough to smell them, they have a really foul odor. They're supposed to smell like sulfur. They look really solid, but they can disappear like in a heartbeat, or they can disappear in an explosion of flames. So, all very interesting stuff.
So this goes back to Celtic legends, is that right?
I'm sorry?
This goes back to like ancient Celtic legends? Is that right?
Yeah, well, it goes back that far, right. And even further, I believe Thor was, the Nordic god Thor was supposed to have black dogs at his command. So, yeah.
And
but
so
certainly the UK is rife with black dog stories. In fact, they give the black dog, depending on where you live, they give it their own names. So, for example, in Norfolk, they call him Old Shuck. In Scotland, they call him Muckle Black. And in Wales, they call him the Dog of Darkness in something Gaelic that I can't pronounce. So.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, so as I say, the UK is just rife with these stories.
And how many of these stories do you think you've come across researching is this something that's few and far between, or is this just another one of these things that people overlook until it happens to them?
I haven't come across a lot of firsthand stories about black dogs. As I say, I came across the one because she was a friend of mine, but I haven't had a lot of people come and say they've seen black dogs. But there are accounts and anecdotes written in the books that I've read about black dogs that happen in the United States as well as the UK.
So I've never heard of this. Do they ever hurt anybody on record or anything like that? What happens if you just let it catch you? What's it going to do? Really?
Well, there's obviously there's different thoughts on that. Some people believe that if you touch it, then that means you're going to die in the very near future.
Like the death dog.
There's one place in the UK, and I can't remember where, but the mothers actually tell their children to go up on top of the hill and play with the black dogs that supposedly live there because it's supposed to be good luck.
Wow.
So it runs the gamut between you're going to die tomorrow to go play with Black Shuck because he's good for you. So.
Yeah.
It could be.
And the depiction almost looks something like a werewolf. And if anybody's playing along at home, you can go to the Sunday Evening Overdose page and check out The Shore, which is the blog that we are talking about right now. So let's see, what else do we want to get to? I saw this. This looked interesting. Ghosts in Court, Historic Lowe's Cottage Decision. That's the title of this article. Sorry. Go ahead. What can you tell us about that?
Apparently ghosts are not a defensible argument in court, according to the Lowe's Cottage decision. There was this couple, Andrew and Josie Smith, that bought this little cottage in Derbyshire, Mayfield, Derbyshire, England in 1994. They moved in and they started supposedly experiencing a lot of things. According to the wife, she saw candles move. She saw mists that she couldn't see through. She recounted rooms where the temperature was quite a bit lower than it should have been. She saw objects that were thrown about. She saw a ghost of a young woman in Victorian dress. And at one point, she said she woke up in bed one night and was getting choked. And her husband was in bed next to her, and there was nothing he could do. So they decided that they were going to, I think they were in financial problems, so they decided that they were going to try to refinance the house. They had bought it with the idea of renovating it and then selling it for a profit. I don't think it was going so well. So they tried to refinance, and they were turned down. So instead of refinancing the house, they decided to take the former owners to court and accuse them basically of that they hadn't disclosed that the cottage was haunted before they bought the place, and they wanted their money back basically. So, and of course, there were two sisters that had sold the house. It was their family house. They had lived in it for 20-some years as they grew up. When their father passed away, the house came to them, and then they sold it to the Smiths. And both sisters said that they had, in the entire 20 years that they'd lived in the place, never encountered anything of what the Smiths were describing. So basically, the judge who called the Smiths' behavior extraordinary throughout the case and said that they were basically nuts. So the Smiths ended up selling the place, moving on. Someone's bought the place since, and they've never experienced or at least reported any type of experiences.
I wonder if they disclosed to the people they sold it. They probably shut their mouths when it was their turn,
Yeah, let's get out of here.
Get the fuck out of here and say nothing.
So,
yeah, I think it's more a case of buyer's remorse.
I say
anything.
that's a selling point.
well, now it's interesting. I've talked about this before. There are laws. I don't know if it's federal, but I know in some states there's laws about how you need to disclose if someone has died in the house, before someone's buying it. And I never. Why would that be a law?
Who cares?
Right. Why would it be a law unless it had something to do with paranormal activity or something that
What if you have a heart attack in the house and then die later at the hospital? I mean, what's the
I don't think
difference?
that counts.
Well,
I don't know, but I know that.
No, I think if you do die in the house, some people are very, very peculiar about that. I mean, I know people that would not buy a house where someone had passed away.
Sure, but and it's if you want to live in a house that's older than 10 years old. I mean, a lot of them have to have. It's like I know that a couple people have died in the house that I live in. I mean. It's an old house. People used to die at home.
Right.
That was,
Right.
Yeah,
right.
they're probably buried in the backyard over there.
There's
where they live.
probably bodies all
guaranteed.
over. Yeah. I live in an old like mob territory. There's all kinds of stuff going on.
Oh no.
So
Just push cars and 1,000 cars in the
oh
river
yeah,
by your house.
Yeah, it's a cool history where I live. So the before we go, we've got a few more minutes. I wanted to talk about spirit communication through automatic writing. That is another article that Robin Strom-Mackey, author on the Shore blog, did here for anybody just joining us. 630-599-7827 if you'd like to call up last minute here and ask any questions of our guest. So let's get to that topic.
Give the number out again.
630-599-7827. That should be slow enough, right?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay. We're talking about spirit communication through automatic writing, and this is interesting. This is another very well documented thing. A lot of famous mediums have done this. What is your take on this? Any legitimacy to this practice?
Very possibly. I know that the Society of Cyclical Research also did a really interesting study on automatic writing. Basically, they had 3 people in the experiment, and they were trying to contact Frederick Myers of the SPR, one of the founders of the SPR.
What's the SPR?
I'm sure you've heard of him. Yeah. So,
sorry. Who is that? Real quick. What is the SPR?
The Society for Cyclical Research.
Oh, okay. No, I don't know who that is. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Well, he knows who you are.
Basically,
Yeah.
the beginning of paranormal research, which began with the spiritualist movement about 1860.
Cool. Okay.
So, yeah.
So, anyways, they're trying to contact this guy.
And they had some of the greatest minds of their age. I mean, scientists, physicists, chemists. William James, who is the father of psychology, was one of the founding fathers. So
I wonder,
really great work.
I wonder when it became taboo for professionals in those fields to talk about this stuff, because people like to laugh it off and ghost or whatever, but then you sit down and you actually get in conversations. Every single person on this planet has their ghost story,
Yeah.
or one that they believe or whatever, and it's like, when did it become a career-ending thing to take this stuff seriously? Because you're saying back then it was some of the most prominent minds around, and back then I think most people kind of just accepted that there was some spirit activity in the world, and it's not like now where people kind of accept the opposite, I guess.
That's possible. So what is this? That you go into a trance and write things? You start writing stuff down, or do you write stories? Do you write big ideas?
No, it's trance writing,
words,
right?
Letters, words? I mean, how does this work?
What you do is you sit down, basically, and you meditate. You clear your mind first, and then you basically put your hand to paper. In our day and age, we might just try this at the computer screen, just put your hands on the keyboard. But basically what you want to do is kind of put yourself in a hypnotic state, and then just write. Just let your hands do what they will. You're not supposed to look at what you're writing. You're not supposed to interpret what you're writing while you're writing it. You just kind of let it flow out for anywhere from 15 minutes to an hour. And then when it stops flowing, then you look at what you've written and you try to interpret it. Supposedly, if you get good enough at this, you can channel spirits. And eventually, as I say, if you get good enough at it, you can start asking questions, and the answers will come with the automatic writing. So is this Frederick Myers? Yes.
I think it was Edgar Casey got famous doing automatic writing originally, wasn't? I think you know who that is, right? He was a famous medium and channeler and stuff, and he, I think, in his hometown would do trance writing. People would explain their ailments to him, their physical and health ailments, and he was like an uneducated farm kid, and he would go into a trance and write out prescriptions of, like, cocktails of different herbs and and remedies and stuff, and he cured a lot of people. I guess
gather these flowers and some toad
yeah,
nuts,
exactly. Make a tea out of this
rabbit's foot and fucking drink it.
Right, do this kind of thing, and people were getting cured, and he became very famous for doing that. Yeah.
Well, and that's I hadn't heard of that one, but there have been people that have no artistic ability that sat down and drew or painted masterpieces. There was one guy that was supposedly channeling composers that would. He didn't have much in the way of musical talent, but he was writing pieces of music.
Wow.
And there was even a woman who was a St. Louis housewife with no education whatsoever that over the course of 20 years was supposedly channeling a writer, and she wrote over these 20 years. She wrote out several novels, a play, 5,000 poems, and several short stories.
Oh,
so,
it's funny.
I wouldn't tell anybody.
Well, but a lot of
that's all my skill.
A lot of prolific artists would say something similar in that, and I'm a writer myself, and I would say something similar in that when I'm writing my most profound stuff, I'm not sweating over it in some kind of complex thought process. It's really flowing through me, and most artists would say that when they're really in the moment. It's
so you're possessed by somebody that's exactly like you, kind of.
You're accessing
but you might be channeling. The idea of going into the hypnotic state is you're channeling your subconscious, where again all those repressed ideas and emotions, are living, waiting for their moment to get out. And I should say that automatic writing, if you Google automatic writing, it's also a tool that's big for creative writers. So
sure,
they'll
right.
often say to get in the mood for writing.
I used to hate that.
Automatic writing. So.
I used to hate doing that in high school. I remember I was like, they would tell us to do that, and I'm like, this is so stupid. Come on, whatever. Just scribble. And I used to just scribble and like protest about it. But so let's see. We got a 4 or 5 minutes left with our guest here, and one other thing that I wanted to talk about. This is something, so as I've been researching paranormal stuff over the years, I noticed there's a connection between water, and this has been a lot of investigators have talked about this. It seems like water is a major conductor for paranormal activity, and it almost has to be present in some place that there's a lot of in a place where that's very active. So
is it flowing water, or is it just water like lake would do?
I think it more has to do with
flowing.
Conducting energy, like having water somewhere nearby or in the air, even or whatever. What would you say about that?
Yeah, it doesn't have to be flowing water, but even like a open well in the basement can be considered. Is enough water, or a river flowing, over the property or something. The article that I wrote was based on Troy Taylor's theory about water. Not that it was a conductor of electricity so much as water has has a memory. And that was kind of proven by a French scientist called Jacques Benveniste, who proved that water, he was doing an experiment with water and a substance, and they made a mistake. They actually diluted the substance to the point where it was just water and the substance was gone. But when they did the experiment, the experiment would still have the same results. And so they thought, well, something's gone wrong. So they tried the experiment again, and again it had the same result. It was positive for the substance, even though the substance wasn't in the water. And so they did this 100 times, and then 200 times, and 300 times, and always came up with the same result. And they had to come to the conclusion that water has a memory. So if something, if water has come in contact with something, it remembers it. So
now
Taylor
sorry,
took it one step further and said, well, if water can remember substances or chemicals, can it also remember events or auditory or visual phenomena, and then play it back like a recorder?
And then which is I hate to bore people. It's like I always go over this same point about how residual hauntings are like just like a tape playing back, you know, and
Absolutely.
a lot of people proposed it's, you know, conditions of the electromagnetic field and ways that it can be manipulated and perceived by some, but not others, and on down the line. And that makes a lot of sense. Now, scientifically, it's been proven that water has this type of memory, and yeah, I mean,
they're like liquid crystal. It's like liquid crystal. Like that's how people believe that they have.
Well, crystal definitely has a lot of information holding power. Yeah, it's like
That's what it
supposedly
is.
a crystal is like.
I've heard all about that stuff with the water. I heard that they took DNA, and the water somehow remembered what DNA was in the water that wasn't in it anymore. So yeah, same thing, same type of thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
That was more recent
same
though.
idea.
I read some story about that.
Well, you know what I love about this theory too, and then I'll shut up. But is the fact that residual haunts the activity will tend to decline over time, and he speculated that it's because the water that's stored in the wood, in the brooks, and the building material starts to evaporate. But if you remember correctly, when you start refurbishing or you start tearing out walls to rebuild a house, all of a sudden the activity starts to uptick. His theory kind of explains that, because now you're exposing wood or building materials that haven't been exposed to the air for a long time. They still have that memory. They're still storing that water, and now it's open to the air and it starts to evaporate, and the activity seems to increase. So I thought it was a really good theory from so many standpoints. It explains residual haunts, and it also explains why during renovations the activity will seem to increase.
Yeah, and I think a lot of mediums would say that when you renovate the house, you make the ghost angry. This is a lot more plausible, I think, scientific.
Because you're rattling the water around and shit, the moisture in the walls.
Well, that's exactly what she's saying. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it
really makes a lot of sense if you think about it.
So if you want to get away from ghosts, you go to the desert, but then the gin will get you.
Right.
Or when you go on a mountain, the black dogs will get
Stay
you.
away from the gin.
God, I'm not even gonna
Where's
go.
the lone man in the desert?
I'm not gonna sleep tonight after this one. Just everything's.
All right. Well, we're about out of time. Thank you very much. Again, this is Robin Strom-Mackey from Delaware Paranormal Research Group, and her blog is called The Shore, although it should be called The Storm.
I agree. That's a good word. Good name.
No, but I'm sure it's taken.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks a lot for being on the show, and maybe we can talk again sometime when you've got something new coming out or whatever. So
sounds good.
Thank you very much. Good talking to you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. There she goes. Robin Strom-Mackey, Delaware Paranormal Research Group.